Hello, just making sure audio, etc. work.
Well, I can certainly hear and see you.
Excellent.
Can he?
That's a feature. But it's often hard to tell.
We're opening the door so it'll get warmer in here. We won't get to do that soon when we fly home.
Works better in Florida than Massachusetts in the winter.
One of the few things that does.
Swimming works much better in Florida than Massachusetts in the winter.
Okay, I guess there are two things.
I can go on.
Anything that's not weather related? The fact that that's taking a while kind of answers the question.
Going to the Disney parks.
Yeah.
Much better in Massachusetts than in Florida than Massachusetts all year long.
Not that we've done that.
Okay, going to SeaWorld, going to any
Isn't
sort
there
of.
a good? I think there's a good aquarium somewhere in Massachusetts, isn't there? I thought there was a really good one around Boston somewhere.
There is the New England Aquarium. That and SeaWorld are on different levels.
Are they? Okay.
There's using up my timeshare points works better here.
Okay. Yeah, we did the whole we did the whole getting a timeshare thing and then never used it and then waited for a while, like 5 or 6 or 10 years, and then sold it, of course, for way less than we bought it for.
Well, I've bought two, and I've used them a lot, so it's been pretty good for us. Yeah, I have a bunch of kids, and we get 3-bedroom units, and it wouldn't have worked to put us in 3 hotel rooms when the kids were little.
I think Robert is hoping to get to actual IETF business.
No, sorry. I also just wanted to remind everybody as we're gathering, it should take a couple of more minutes for people to gather, but remind everybody that these sessions are recorded and are published to YouTube.
So be careful about what you say regarding timeshares.
No harm was done. Just wanted to make sure that we,
The login to manage my timeshare
at the beginning of a meeting like this, we can get me to code a trim. So.
Yep.
Well, the idea was to come away for a little bit at a time of the year that isn't usually stressful. Of course, the IETF has fixed that for this year, but stressful in a good way. I mean, we're excited about the project, but normally this is a quiet time of the year for us because, I don't know, look, most people don't launch new projects this time of year.
Jennifer, is the audio level better?
I think you're still a little quieter than other people for me, but.
Agreed.
We'll solve this the old-fashioned way. That should work better.
Yay.
All right, we still have a few people that are joining. Liz, double check if you're looking at the Medico roster for who's here. If it's only listing Zulip participant, they're probably not really here. Okay, joining is slowed down. We'll go ahead and start. Welcome, everybody. Again, a last reminder, this session is being recorded, will be posted to YouTube. We do like that as many people that are willing to share video as we can get so that this is as close to meeting around a table in real space as we can get. The notes have been available for several days. I haven't seen any last minute proposals for addition. Are there any bashes before we jump in? All right, not hearing anything. We'll go ahead and start. So, from my perspective, the biggest hot topic for discussion is our infrastructure transition. I put that first, just because of the magnitude of it. I may be blinded to other things, so if we do get to the end of the call and there was something that somebody wishes we had talked about, please bring up the bash when we get to the open discussion. We have a great deal of work underway, working with the teams that we brought on through the RFP process in October, Sirius and Painless Security, to define and build out the infrastructure that we will be moving our services onto. There's a update that I sent to the tools discuss list that I will be periodically sending more information as it becomes available. A lot of the things that we have to move only require a small amount of work in terms of packaging and figuring out the details so that we have a deployment that looks like an infrastructure as code deployment instead of people pulling knobs as we currently have. But some of the things that we're going to be working on are going to require significant structural refactoring in the process of their moving. We're still figuring out the wins of all of this happening, although there's a brief overview in a slide deck that Margaret prepared and is linked in the notes, shared into the meeting materials like any other IETF interim. Our deployment's primarily going to be into AWS. There's in that slide deck a little bit of an overview of structure. I don't think that we're going to spend a lot of time talking to it on this call, but people can skim it if they've got questions. We are planning to continue to use DigitalOcean the way we've been using DigitalOcean, and in particular for some key points like our persistent secret store using an instance of HashiCorp Vault. We're planning to leave at DigitalOcean. We are very close to beginning the transition of the initial set of services. We had hoped to get them done before this call, but we're still in the discussing what the actual infrastructure tooling will look like to get to a deployment. That's, I think, going to iron out by the time we get towards the end of the week. We're going to be deploying analytics because it requires almost zero changes to move, just a matter of packaging it so that we'll go into the new infrastructure. Author Tools shortly after that has very similar characteristics. And Yang Catalog, which is going to be a non-trivial transition from how it's currently deployed with Pantheon. We're pushing on getting that done because of the arrangement with Pantheon running out at the end of the year. So the rest of the schedule is being worked out. One bit of insight that I wanted to point to that we already have is that we're planning to transition Mailman 3 in place on IETF-A before the entire mail chain is moved onto the new infrastructure that has connotations for how Mailman is attached to applications like the data tracker and the mail archive that we're currently working through with Sirius. But the timeline for this is looking like late December, early January, and I will send a note to the community telling them what to expect ahead of time before this actually takes place. So as I mentioned, we do have a short slide deck showing a little bit of information about what our infrastructure is going to look like that you can pull up and skim through. I'm not planning to share it unless somebody has questions. I see people squinting. I assume that they're skimming through stuff. If you look at it and do have questions, feel free to interrupt as we're going through the rest of the items in the call, and we can come back to it. All right, not hearing questions, we'll move on. Yes, I will leave this topic with the, oh my gosh, it is a lot. We have a frightening amount of things to do in a very short period of time. All right. I've announced several times that we are going to deploy Feed RFC, which we've been working to for several months, shortly after the end of this particular call. That will involve a planned short downtime. We're expecting to be in the order of 15 minutes. I don't know if I need to go into this call. We've talked in the past about what Feed RFC is bringing in. I think I'll just leave it to if anyone has any questions about what's happening with this. And we'll note that there will be another major model changing deployment that will come in soon after, hopefully as early as next week, that will get rid of the few places that we have model references directly into the Django user table where we really should be having model references into the data tracker person table. It's another one that will have implications for people who have developed on top of the V1 API, but these models are obscure enough that I don't expect that nearly as many people will be as disrupted working on top of the API as have been disrupted with the change to where to find RSCs. So things for this are on track. The change is big. It's actually bigger than the time zone aware set of changes that we ran through earlier this year. Speaking of earlier this year, I will take this opportunity to point out that velocity for the data tracker is up massively. Do at some point in the future take the time to scroll back through the releases on the data tracker release page to a year ago and appreciate just how much has happened in the last 12 months. Unless someone has questions, I'll move on. Next item, We are continuing to improve the existing post-confirm. There's a PR that has changes provided by John Levine that addresses some issues, some community members from large organizations were having with DMARC rejections, makes additional tweaks to the envelope from as much as messages are leaving our system. We will probably bring those in later this week or early next week, as we've done before, trial by fire, basically testing with the live infrastructure, because that's what we have available to us right now. And we are really looking forward to a future where we have a test environment that we can exercise these things in ahead of time. And that is going to be, in our near future, next couple of months. Post-confirm itself is also being re-implemented in this new email infrastructure, splitting apart its rewriting and challenging parts. To help inform that, we've instrumented the current post-confirm and have learned some fairly interesting things, among which are that the volume of spam that it's basically keeping at bay is on the order of 4,000 messages a day. So, anyone have any, no, there's a point in here that I did need to mention. Did I write on it? Yes. We did have a problem with the change that we made in early October that led to messages that went through post-confirm more than once. And this would happen when a message went to a list that was subscribed to another list, or went to a list that had an alias that was subscribed to the list, or several other variants like this, as I wrote. Stopping on its second iteration through post-confirm and then being lost. It's been corrected, was corrected shortly after IETF 118, and I've been working with the various lists that were affected. It's a fairly small number, to remediate what happened. So, pausing again for questions or comments. Cindy can give me a brief break and talk a bit about the website transition.
So for the IAB website, the IAB signed off on the new Wagtail website while we were in Prague. There is still an open issue with sidebar menus showing the wrong level of page, but the IAB agreed that there's a temporary workaround for that where we just put the child pages in manually until the developers can get that sorted out. I'm working on putting together the list of all the page redirects that we're going to need once we do this transition. So that's in progress. One thing that came up when we were in Prague was learning that the public IAB wiki is in the same www.iab.org namespace as the WordPress site. And once we move to Wagtail, that can't be how things are. The IAB had been planning to move their wikis from MediaWiki to Wiki.js anyway. They had originally planned to do that after the website transition, but rather than make that change twice, Liz has taken that on and actually moved all the content from the public IAB MediaWiki into a Wiki.js that was finished at the end of last week. So that should be signed off on pretty soon. Maria has a couple of additional content updates, but I don't think those actually really affect the transition timeline, because those can also be made after the fact. But just with the holidays and everything else going on and the IT transition timeline, it's looking like we can call this done and finish the transition in January.
Awesome, and thank you, Liz, for taking on that extra lift. Cindy, for me, there was a little bit of packet loss. I was able to listen through it. If anyone else had more difficulty and had questions, please jump in.
I just had a question. You said you're gonna that you've basically completed moving wiki into Wiki.js, but I didn't hear what wiki that is.
The
The IAB's public wiki, which is a media wiki.
Okay. Right. Thanks.
All right. So our next topic should be a lively one. We have had for quite some time several ways that we present documents, in particular internet drafts, on the data tracker. There is the doc page, there are the text pages that aren't actually at the data tracker but are off on www.ietf.org. There are the doc HTML pages. I've provided a list with links to the different views. I think most people are familiar with them. Lars started working down a path to reduce the number of libraries that we were dependent on, and was removing some libraries in favor of using functionalities that were available in others that we knew we were going to continue to use, and managed to basically walk this into a place where we need to ask if we're doing the right thing and how we should time our plan for change around what the doc page itself should show for an internet draft in particular. So for the example for the STIR document that I provided the link to, we have a page that presents a bunch of metadata, what the different states are, who the places to send mail when things change are. And at the very bottom of that page, there was historically a text view of the document where somebody had the option to see just the preview or the full text of the draft. This existed long before we had the HTMLized views in places. It continues to get used, but it's hard to tell when the doc page is being used, if it's being used for the metadata or for reading that actual content. And in either case, the number of views of the doc page is a couple of orders of magnitude lower than the views of the doc HTML pages. So Lars has a few PRs in place, one of which replaces the plain text view with something that uses the ID to HTML, so it gets something packaged, so it gets something that looks very much like the HTMLized views, but with slightly different styling and of course different framing. But it gets us into a place where now we've got yet another way of looking at an internet draft, and I wanted to have a conversation here about whether or not that's what we really wanted. He's also asked, well, can we just remove the view of the document and only have the metadata page and make people click away to get to the content? This is sounds very much like a conversation we've been having about how people view RFCs at rfceditor.org, where there's been a pretty strong, no, you should look at the document and the metadata should be available, but the content of the document is what matters. So with this introduction, I had a set of questions. What should we do? Should we accept the change to show the HTMLized version of the file instead of just the plain text version of the file at the bottom of the doc page? Do we remove the presentation of the text on that metadata page? Do we do something else? Do we refactor the HTML page so that the metadata appears there? Do we do this now? Do we wait until we can engage a UX expert to help us build something better? And there is some argument for incremental improvement and then big improvement later. So please, somebody else jump in. Does anybody care? besides me and Lars.
So this is Russ. I think that the, whichever renders faster is what I'm interested in.
Yeah, it's effectively equivalent. The HTMLized version gives you links.
So I see no problem with doing this. I'm with the expectation that we get a UX person to really look at it again later. The current one is, as you said, suboptimal by a long way compared to the HTMLized one. I mean, I personally prefer the HTML one, but there's all sorts of different things. So this is an improvement, and that's enough for saying yes, I think.
Yeah, the only downside that I really see is slightly different style and now having a new place that might be attractive to point to over the docs/HTML place, and we may end up seeing some traffic migrate when later we do the redesign. Will make it maybe a little more difficult to merge them back into the same place. But maybe not. Maybe it all turns into /doc if we have the metadata and the HTMLized view all in one place.
I mean, I'm wondering if this is something that we're supposed to ask the community, because we don't really know who's using this for what, right? Like, is anybody actually doing this in a more automated fashion, in which case taking it away might make them mad?
Sadly, making someone upset is a higher yield technique for getting real feedback. So,
However, Warren, I think if someone was going there, they should go straight to whichever the HTML or the text link, whichever one they're after. They're readily available.
Can you guys hear me now?
yeah.
Okay, good. Before it didn't work. So yeah, just for the record, I don't really care what we do with the PR, right? So I'm not attached to it. I basically started, as you said, trying to find some craft in the data tracker that's really only used in one place. And there is a piece of craft that is like 20% of what RFC HTML or IDHTML, whatever it's called, is doing, but it's doing it slightly differently, and that caused me to use the other one. Yeah, I don't have a strong opinion here. I probably would lean towards removing that preview completely, but I understand people. There's probably going to be a few people that love it for some reason, but I don't understand.
So it's not a preview. I guess some people can select preview, but I've selected no show me the entire doc. I like seeing the metadata up top. I like having the document there. Also, links would be awesome rather than the text format. And I guess a comment also on who clicks what link may also be determined by what the search engine gives them. If they search on a draft string, have we optimized for one sort of URL over another? I get the status page when I search through DuckDuckGo, for instance.
Yeah, there's not yet been a great deal of work on SEO for the data tracker itself.
So I can report that it always takes me 2 clicks from the search page to the document I want to look at, and it would be great if there was a way to turn this into 1 click.
I mean, I'll say I just generally look at it, like all of my links go to this page, and I generally just scroll down and read it on the metadata page. I don't click on any of the other formats because it's right here. So my use case, the current one works well for, and I, realize I might be a dinosaur, but I like this text view.
So if that text view suddenly developed links, would it be problematic?
It depends if it looks like this or if it looks like the HTML view, because
Well, it will look like there's a copy in the PR. If you click on the link to the PR, I did a screenshot that you could look at.
oh, okay, I didn't actually click on the PR because I didn't want to.
I do think anything beyond a very basic change here is just going to get stuck in the weeds, and we're not the best people to do anything other than a very basic change, because there's so much to consider, and to be honest, so much of stuff has built up over the years. We need a UX expert to do it. So if we're just talking about just that one change of the text bit down below to the HTMLI so that people can actually just navigate the document below a bit better, I think that's a perfectly reasonable compromise. And then any broader changes, any other changes should come part of the proper design process later on.
Cool. Warren, were you able to find that screenshot?
Yep. I mean, if it looks like it is in the PR, that's fine with me. I mean, I realize that my view isn't the important one here, but to me, that view where like I've got the header information largely in the way that it currently looks is nice. I dislike the view where I'm trying to figure out how best to explain it, where like the header is all differently moved around, and I have the table of contents on the right, etc.
Right.
We should have better terms for the different views. But yeah, I dislike the view that I just put the link to. But that's me. I'm potentially off in the rough.
Forgive me for the lag. I'm taking a moment to see the chat better. Okay, I understand, Warren. You like the terms you're looking for is you like the HTMLized view better than you like the RFC XML derived HTML view. Okay. I'll move on unless somebody else has something they want to add on this topic. The next one may just be an FYI given the people that are here. There was a long discussion inside the ISG and with the stream managers for applying a banner to the views of internet drafts, making it more clear what the standing in the IETF was of unadopted internet drafts and non-IETF stream RFCs. That appears to have settled. I've been waiting, Lars, for Roman to give me an artifact, since he was the person that was shepherding this whole thing, to say go before moving ahead with that PR. So
I can follow up with Roman and double check.
cool. And last thing I have on general discussion before we jump up to meta level is that the March tools call is at a time where a lot of people are likely to be on airplanes, and I'm proposing that we shift it forward a week. If no one objects here, I'll send a note to the list as well, and we'll make that change. Let me pull the open discussion topic that Lars added forward to this point. I'd like to talk again about using Gravatar instead of being in the business of gathering and using photos ourselves.
Yeah, so concretely, my proposal would be that we add a preference setting that defaults to on, that basically checks if a user has a Gravatar, and if so, we use it. And if somebody who's concerned about WordPress seeing that traffic, they can disable it and they won't have a profile photo. Because I don't think we should build functionality to manage those photos ourselves. We could just rip that stuff out. That would be my extreme proposal.
So I don't have any comment on that proposal. I just want to note that currently MeetEcho looks for profile pics in Data Tracker, and if it doesn't find it in Data Tracker, it looks at Gravatar. So I haven't worked through it.
I think Zulip does as well, doesn't it?
Zulip just goes straight for Gravatar.
Yeah, so we're de facto, right? People are already using Gravatar, even if they don't know that they are.
So I'm wondering if, I guess maybe the thing to say is, if maybe with regards to MeetEcho, is if this option is implemented in Data Tracker, I suppose it wouldn't stop MeetEcho still looking for Gravatar.
MeetEcho would end up looking wherever OIDC told them to look.
Okay.
In other words, I think that if we were to make this change, we could make it in a way that MeetEcho didn't have to change their code at all. But it's also a thing that they would be willing to adjust to should we want them to make changes. It's not a high impact decision. The real, I guess, impactful thing in Lars's extreme proposal is that, you know, if somebody cares about we're using this other service and they don't want references to whatever they put in that service, they don't want to put anything in that service, then they just don't get to have a picture, is the fairly extreme thing. But that's an extension of we're moving a lot of things into cloud infrastructure anyhow. So
I mean, I also wonder what happens if people want to be able to have two sort of different identities or things. Like the image that I use here is different to what my Gravatar image is, because my Gravatar image largely gets used on things like ICANN and other bits. And so there might be some initial confusion when people realize that a photo they weren't expecting or a less or more professional photo suddenly starts showing up. I don't know if anybody cares, but
yeah, details when we do this, we can provide an option, and if we were to do this, we could provide an option in the profile that says, hey, what is the identity that, you know, this thing, our services should be talking to Gravatar for, which tends to look like an email address. All right. So you can have multiple things out at Gravatar just keyed off an email address. But it's a good observation. Thank you. All right. No one else seems to be running to the mic with a strong opinion.
I think Michael had a comment in the chat that it would be good to review about what happens to.
So yeah, the working group chairs page, I guess, is
has a list of photos, and I think I don't know if I can have different photos right now. I think not, or at least I have the same one. The other thing is that, and I guess I'll check Zulip and whatever. I guess my Meet Echo photo is my data tracker one. I should check Zulip.
Yes.
So, but I use a different. I use an MCR Plus IETF for all the IETF stuff, and I guess I could set a different gravatar for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that answers to Warren's point, which is, and I think you can have different gravatars for different contexts. And I guess with enough warning, that'll be okay for people.
Anyway, but I will up-level this again because it's a kind of a strategic question. Is it worth getting out of the business of managing the bits of somebody's photos? And from a data manager perspective, if I could step away from having to manage that bit of PII, it would be a much happier thing. So.
And currently it's also manual, right? If I say wanted to update my data tracker photo, I would have to send email to support at IETF with here's my newer picture.
Yes.
So I presume we're all aware that there is a federated open source alternative to Gravatar using something called Ivatar, with multiple people all providing this service all across. So I'm very happy with using Gravatar, but I'm just suggesting that there may be at some point someone's wanting us to add others on or start to use other types of services as well. But I think I entirely agree with Robert that the principle is that we should not store these things. We should use an external site for that.
All right. Well, unless there are other comments, we're now basically to the FYI part of the meeting where hopefully we can take what's been reported as read and just leaving things open if people had read them and had any questions that we could follow up on. So please take a moment to skim through the individual FYI sections and then the reports on the development projects. Anyone have any other business that they'd like to bring? Well, thanks everyone again for taking time out of their day so that we can have these feedback sections. They're very valuable. And we will, for those of you that we won't see before the end of year break, I hope your end of year activities are pleasant. And we'll see everyone online as we move along. Thank you.
You too, Robert. Thanks.